This is the image that now defines the presidency. Not a speech, not a headline, not a campaign slogan, but a physical wound carved into the center of American power. Walk past 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and you are no longer looking at the carefully preserved symbol of continuity and stability. You are looking at a construction disaster frozen in time. A massive, mud-filled crater sits where the East Wing once stood, surrounded by idle cranes that tower over the White House like silent witnesses. The noise that once dominated the complex is gone, replaced by something far more unsettling: complete silence. As of 8 a.m. on Monday, January 26, 2026, all construction on President Trump's controversial $400 million Grand Ballroom was ordered to stop immediately and indefinitely. The project, mocked by preservationists as the ballroom from hell, is officially dead in the water. A federal judge has issued a devastating injunction that doesn't merely pause the work, it accuses the administration of deception, negligence, and the reckless destruction of national heritage. The president woke up expecting progress on what he envisioned as his monument. Instead, a federal marshal taped a cease and desist order to the construction fence outside his home. The money is gone, the donors vanished, and what remains is a gaping hole in the ground that perfectly mirrors a presidency suddenly out of momentum, out of credibility, and rapidly running out of road. To understand how the White House ended up like this, you have to rewind to the early days of the second term. Fresh off inauguration, President Trump announced the most aggressive renovation in White House history. He openly complained that the existing East Room was too small, outdated, and embarrassing for hosting world leaders. In private memos that later leaked, he described the space as third world, an insult that stunned historians and staff alike. His solution was not a modest upgrade, but a grand ballroom designed to rival European palaces. 90,000 square feet, 30-foot ceilings, gold leaf detailing, a victory balcony facing the Treasury Department. The price tag was staggering: $400 million. But Trump promised the public something crucial: taxpayers would not pay a cent. He claimed wealthy patriots had already pledged the full amount. It would be a gift to the nation. What he didn't emphasize was the irreversible cost. To build the ballroom, the existing East Wing had to be demolished. That meant erasing the First Lady's offices, historic gardens, and decades of institutional memory. Preservation groups immediately sued, arguing that the White House belongs to the people, not its temporary occupant. But Trump pressed forward anyway, betting that once the building was gone, the money and permits would follow. It was a classic Trump move: tear first, figure it out later. And that gamble would soon collapse spectacularly. The foundation of the entire project rested on one assumption: that the money was real. In reality, it never truly was. Behind the scenes, the $400 million existed only as non-binding promises from hedge fund managers, casino tycoons, and real estate magnates closely tied to the MAGA donor ecosystem. There were no escrow accounts, no secured transfers, just handshake pledges and optimistic projections. Then the world shifted. A bond crash in Japan sent shockwaves through global markets. Assets were seized in New York. The president suffered a humiliating moment on the world stage at Davos. Suddenly, those wealthy donors were facing margin calls and collapsing portfolios. When the Treasury Department finally called to collect the cash for the ballroom fund, the donors didn't argue. They disappeared. One major casino magnate reportedly withdrew a $50 million pledge outright, citing market volatility. The judge overseeing the case was livid. In a ruling that read more like an indictment than a legal opinion, he described the funding as phantom capital. The administration had demolished a historic federal structure based on money that did not exist. The court refused to allow the White House to become an abandoned construction site fueled by broken promises. In that moment, the entire project collapsed, not because of politics, but because the check never cleared. For months, the administration shielded the project behind one powerful phrase: national security. They argued that the ballroom would include a state-of-the-art underground bunker to replace the aging Presidential Emergency Operations Center. That claim was the legal lever that allowed demolition to proceed despite fierce opposition. But when the case returned to court, that defense imploded. The judge unsealed a classified Secret Service report the White House had fought to keep hidden. The findings were devastating. The Secret Service had opposed the project from the beginning. According to the report, the massive open pit created critical vulnerabilities, exposing the White House foundations to surveillance, tunneling risks, and drone threats. The proposed glass-walled ballroom was described as a nightmare to protect, a sniper's dream, and a surveillance magnet. Even worse, intelligence officials confirmed that the existing Situation Room had just undergone a $50 million renovation and was already state-of-the-art. Moving it under a ballroom made no sense. The court concluded that national security had been used as a pretext, not a necessity. That finding destroyed the administration's legal defense entirely. Under preservation law, vanity is not justification. The ballroom was no longer a government project. It was exposed as exactly what critics had said all along: an ego-driven monument with no legal foundation. Politics is perception, and the perception surrounding this project is catastrophic. The president who built his brand on luxury, control, and perfection now wakes up to a mud pit outside his window. For months, staff endured the noise of heavy machinery disrupting Oval Office meetings. Now, the silence is worse. The cranes stand idle, frozen in place, turning the White House into a permanent symbol of incompletion. Every visiting world leader must drive past the crater. Every television stand-up from the North Lawn features yellow machinery looming in the background. The contrast is brutal. This is the man who promised to rebuild America faster and better than anyone, yet his signature project is behind schedule, over budget, unfunded, and illegal. The image connects seamlessly to other failures: the seized properties, the unpaid debts, the growing narrative of insolvency. The great builder persona collapses under the weight of a project he couldn't finish. The optics do the damage automatically. No talking point can erase a hole in the ground. The donor class saw the danger before the public did. Once lawsuits mounted and judges began using words like fraud and deception, the ballroom became radioactive. No executive wanted their name engraved on a building tied to legal chaos. Worse, the judge hinted that donors who signed affidavits claiming funds were secured could face investigations for misleading the court. Lawyers were hired. Distance was created. The donor network fractured almost overnight. What had once been framed as a patriotic gift now looked like a financial trap. At the same time, labor unions walked off the site after payment assurances evaporated. For a president who built his image on construction and deals, losing the builders themselves was a devastating signal. The ballroom collapsed not just financially, but socially. The people who once stood behind it scattered, leaving the administration isolated and exposed. The judge gave the administration 30 days: secure the money or restore the site. Congressional funds are blocked. Foreign funding would trigger an immediate constitutional crisis. That leaves one likely outcome: the hole gets filled. Dirt is poured back in, grass is planted, and the East Wing becomes a memory. For a president obsessed with physical legacy, this is the ultimate humiliation. He wanted to leave a palace behind. Instead, he may leave a patch of fresh sod where history once stood. The East Wing survived wars, presidencies, and decades of change. It did not survive ambition without planning. The stopped construction site now stands as a perfect metaphor for a term defined by excess, shortcuts, and collapse. The builder promised greatness, What remains is destruction, silence, and a hole in the ground that no amount of spin can cover.